There's no debate in this statement. The Shield, yes, is one of the most important factions in pro wrestling history. Despite being just recent history, despite not even being together for that long in comparison to other factions, they remain maybe one of the best booked groups in WWE history, the gold standard of what it means to be a dominant trio. Their impact is where it matters, and that's where we start, taking a deep dive into the incredible way that the Shield changed WWE forever. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Kellum, throwing my fist together for you to form some type of alliance with me in the comments. If you could form your own version of the Shield with 3 wrestlers of modern day WWE, let us know in the comments below. Also, subscribe to Sportskeeda Wrestling and give a like to this video already. We've touched on this topic before, and the sum of the impact came down to this of what the Shield actually did. WWE created a trio of main event superstars, dominated the landscape of professional wrestling for years to come. Jon Moxley, aka Dean Ambrose, has accomplished quite a bit, but his jump to All Elite Wrestling and his direct contribution to creating the #2 wrestling promotion in the world has cemented his legacy as an all-timer of his generation. As for Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, their accolades speak for themselves. Roman Reigns is one of the biggest superstars in all of professional wrestling and is one of the biggest world champions of recent memory. Seth Rollins, of course, is a world champion level performer in his own right and is one of the most bankable big match performers in all of mainstream wrestling. A combined 11 WrestleMania main events, 11 world championships put both of them as the undisputed #1 and #2 superstars in the post-John Cena era of WWE. But beyond those accolades and all the glory the 3 men have accomplished, there's a lot more that makes these things look surface level, maybe even superficial. The meat of it is what we're going to look at here. Origins and presentations, the establishments of dynamics and character shaping. When the Shield debuted and got their start, they did it in a big way. They got the ball and they ran with it, as they destroyed a triple threat WWE Championship main event match on pay-per-view at Survivor Series 2012 in Indianapolis. They wrecked John Cena and Ryback as a goon squad to help a heelish CM Punk escape with the championship. Different abilities. In the early days, WWE leaned in on the idea of Dean Ambrose possibly being the leader or mouthpiece of the group because he was the loudmouth and the one who spoke up first. Still, WWE never tried outright to exactly explicitly state who the group's leader was. Dean Ambrose was the voice, Seth Rollins was the mind, and Roman Reigns was the muscle. They played off each other so perfectly and organically that it developed a very strong dynamic, especially in the ring in special 6-man tag team matches. It created a blueprint for the future. Also, the group as we saw it in their initial stages wasn't exactly what was initially planned at first before it got on screen. Chris Hero, aka Cassius Ohno in the NXT training ranks, was originally slotted to play the enforcer role that eventually went to Roman Reigns. Yeah, wouldn't that have been different? We would get Superman elbow strikes instead of Superman punches, right? For context, Cassius Ohno, or Chris Hero, was still 33 years old and was looked at as a possible major player in the future for WWE. His contributions to pro wrestling turned out to be more of a behind-the-scenes advisor role, but even though it might seem crazy in hindsight, it wasn't crazy at the time to think that someone like Cassius Ohno could be the 3rd member of the Shield. He was, and still is, one of the best wrestlers of his time and truly came up with the ranks of a lot of people out of the Ring of Honor circuit and beyond. The group dynamic established by the Shield in terms of modern day wrestling and the group having an identity is something we've seen play out in newer factions in WWE, like the Purple and Black of the Judgment Day and the Bloodline. We can't emphasize just how glad we are as fans that WWE finally took the shift towards telling stories over a longer period of time, especially under Triple H's new regime and his creative team. The Shield benefited from a long-term storytelling throughout their existence and combination together. It felt like a lost art form in terms of the presentation, or at least an inconsistent one in the days of the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era. What the Attitude Era had was an incredible amount of star power and an unending supply of chaos. Long-term stories weren't nearly as focused on at the time. Some characters in those times benefited from long-term stories like Austin, The Rock, Mankind, Triple H. We're not going to argue that The Shield was more impactful than The Rock or Stone Cold. We're not delusional. Do you have a counter on how many times we say impact in this video? They've been at the top for a long time, and it got going with The Shield. Just look at the individual paths that Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose, Jon Moxley, have gone on after 2014 when they had that wild breakup. Especially Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. Their past consistently comes back to haunt them in this entire thing and has direct ramifications on existing storylines. Whether it was Royal Rumble 2022 when they faced off against each other, the main event of WrestleMania 40 Night 2, or the 2025 Royal Rumble, the history of their characters always comes back to how they started in WWE together for these incredible callback moments. Roman Reigns' tyrannical run as the tribal chief, where he demanded absolute loyalty from his family while manipulating and abusing them, was a direct result of Seth Rollins' chair shot to the back. Even with Dean Ambrose gone out of WWE, Roman Reigns made sure to keep him in their spirit by telling Rollins that he could never forgive him for what he did to both of them. What we're getting at here is that the impression of The Shield can even be directly traced as one of the reasons why Triple H books maybe the way he does. The reason why WWE became so hot again in the recent years is all the way back to the summer of 2022. A third significant way that The Shield changed WWE forever is proving the effectiveness, the long-term effectiveness of the NXT talent developmental system. Now, we know that some of you are probably getting ready to type, but Seth Rollins and Jon Moxley were already established before they joined the WWE. Yes, that's true. They were already quite experienced in pro wrestling and at the televised level. As compared to Roman Reigns, they were well ahead of him. He was a newcomer at the time. But you could counter-argue that both Seth Rollins and Jon Moxley weren't anywhere as a fine-tuned product for the bright lights of the mainstream level that WWE has in the early 2010s as they were in developmental. They were still very fresh talents who had proven themselves elsewhere, but they were nowhere near as close to the finished product that they are today. When looking at the NXT system as it stands, there are so many examples of superstars who became real modern-day legends from that brand. Sami Zayn, Paige, Finn Balor, Bayley, Asuka, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, and you're seeing a lot of potential with new names coming up from NXT like Roxanne Perez. Before NXT became what we know it is today, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose benefited from being in that nest of rich wrestling minds and being cultivated and prepared for a mainstream audience. It was from the instant success of The Shield that Triple H and his creative team have worked relentlessly to turn WWE's developmental system into a world-class talent incubator that it is today. The Shield as a trio had their main developmental phase in Florida Championship Wrestling, but they were part of the transition into NXT at its earliest level, which also kind of launched a third brand in one way or another. So in a way, WWE built the momentum on their success to create an unprecedented level of building talent for the future at a near constant rate, and talent that can be utilized in special storylines like the one they were utilized in. The ultimate butterfly effect. The Shield's breakup had an unprecedented butterfly effect on WWE and all of wrestling. It was one of the biggest things when it happened. To elaborate on this, we're going to highlight some of the comments Seth Rollins himself, who said in an interview with The Pivot in 2024, he pointed out the harsh reality of the wrestling business and WWE in 2014. It was not trending in the right direction. The decreased interest in wrestling to a kind of more casual audience had been happening for years, but in 2014 and 2015, there was some fatigue paired with maybe creative mishandling that posed a major threat to WWE's future. It was marked by an era of live event ticket sales going down significantly, and even periods like September of that time were stained by low attendance for live televised versions of Raw and SmackDown. To add to that, there was some reported low morale within WWE's locker room in a period where media was shifting from television to streaming, and WWE was about to launch the WWE Network. It was the passing of a torch from one major form of established media to a new one that was still very much growing at the time. The creation of 3 new main event stars saw them all go in different directions, but they had one thing in common. They were the leaders of WWE and the men that were making things move forward. Actually, Seth Rollins and Reigns, and obviously Moxley and AEW, led this new era where they continue to reach never-before-seen records. The milestones are there. One specific moment that we can point to is WrestleMania 40 and how Night 2 ended. In terms of interest, it was arguably the biggest WrestleMania main event of all time. Those metrics are there. I know some of you are like, we're sick of hearing it, but it's true, and you need it for the gravity of this. Because Seth Rollins coming out in the Shield gear, getting smashed in the back with a steel chair by a distracted Roman Reigns, is a story that threads its way back to 2014 when they broke up, when Rollins turned on Reigns, and when they debuted in 2012. It is a story that is threaded back more than 10 years, tying to the 2 biggest men in the company and at the biggest show in modern wrestling history. Although some might think it's a far-fetched statement for Seth Rollins, we tend to agree with him that when he said the butterfly effect of eventually having that 10 years later in a multi-billion-dollar Netflix deal, yeah, you can connect all of the dots. Even though Moxley was already out of the picture with WWE, the impact of Reigns and Rollins' characters wouldn't be nearly as much without their presence on WWE television for so long and that history together. Ambrose, or Moxley, yes, some of you still want to call him Ambrose, said that they didn't give a you-know-what about the hostilities they may face backstage for pushing the needle in a different direction. They just pushed the pace and had great matches, especially as a 3-man team, and that's why everybody wanted to work with them. Being the flag bearers that they eventually became, they also turned the locker room into a different space, especially reportedly Rollins and Reigns. And you know what happened after that. The backstage culture reportedly changed forever and for the better. There are so many instances of how Roman Reigns and Rollins have had incredible locker room leadership. Aleister Black, or Malachi Black as some may know him, shared a story on Facebook of how he was used to being the one to pick up after others in any locker room when they were on tour with different promotions across Europe. We don't mean picking up the slack of others, we mean literally picking up after people. He continued to do so out of respect, even on the main roster when he made it to WWE, until Roman Reigns personally came up to him and told him that he wanted him to stop cleaning up after others. Mr. Black even referenced Seth Rollins as a locker room leader and said that the impact they had backstage was a highly positive one. Luke Gallows directly credited Reigns for the change in the entire vibe of the locker room. What was previously an environment maybe where superstars, even younger ones, had to walk around eggshells and keep a chill, respectable environment going, but also feel a sense of anxiety, there was a common goal and sentiment to elevate WWE to newer and greater heights. When CM Punk returned to WWE in 2023 after having a lot of animosity and legal fights against the company, reportedly a doctor, you know that story, he seemed pleasantly surprised at how things had changed backstage, stating that the current WWE locker room was everything the business was supposed to be. While he may have planted the seeds for change, he wanted that change a long time ago, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Moxley directly facilitated that positive change, and one that is long-lasting and is going to be felt for years to come. WWE fans have really seen a good idea of how much the rivalries can change the business. We've seen so many rivalries over the years. Hogan and Andre, Austin and The Rock, leading to huge booms in popularity. These same rivalries can be tied to the names that we're talking about here, and they owe a lot to eventually propping up WWE to where it is today. It's not too different than so many other sports over the years, where a defining rivalry between 2 major teams or 2 iconic players leads to a growth in viewership and interest. Our point isn't that the impact of Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose was better than their predecessors. It was an impact of a totally different kind, one that shaped the era that they're in and the era that we're in today. an era that's unlike anything we've seen before. 3 men given an opportunity that flipped an entire and went running greatly into the future through tough times and great times. Only time will tell where this is going to go and how impactful they'll be. If we'll ever get a reunion of all 3 of them, that's an interesting story as well. Which other factions in wrestling history do you want to see us cover? Let us know in the comments below.